Welcome to another episode of Civic Cipher. I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
They call me Q Ward, but it's an abbreviation of my actual name. But I'll get into that later. How you doing, Rams?
I'm good, man. Had a good week, man. How about yourself?
Fantastic. We got esteemed company today.
Yes, indeed. We are joined on this show by the one and only Dianne Post. How you doing?
I'm doing good, but there are actually 4 Dianne Post in the Phoenix area.
You know, something tells me that you would know the exact number of Dianne Posts. And so
I'm the only lawyer, though.
We have the special one.
You have the special one, exactly.
Indeed, we do. And of course, we're going to talk about not just the voter suppression initiatives that are being drawn up, voted on, and so forth. We're also going to talk about a number of other things that are being brought to vote in the city, right?
In the state.
In the state.
And the city, too, actually. We can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we go too far past it, I want people to know really who you are. So let's give everyone a little bit of background about who's joining us today on Civic Cipher.
Well, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney since 1980, before your parents were probably born. And and I did 18 years here in Phoenix representing battered women and molested children. And so I did a lot of that, and that can really burn you right out. From there, I went to doing international human rights law.
Okay.
And I worked for ABA, the State Department, Germany, a various variety of different groups. And I lived in 6 different countries: Hungary, Russia twice, and in Hungary, Cambodia, Kenya, Algeria, and then I worked in 14 others. So all over the former Soviet Union, and then some other African countries that I worked in as well. So that was all on human rights, primarily related to violence against women and children, not solely, but primarily. And then I also did the, in Hungary, I worked with the European Roma Rights Center. Do you know who Roma are?
Please educate me.
You might call them gypsies.
Oh, yes. Okay.
But the proper name is Roma. Right. And so I represented them and eventually brought a case against the United Nations. It's NM versus UNMIK because they placed the Roma refugees from the war of the Balkans on lead poison land, which they knew was lead poison. Wow. And they said it was for 7 months, and it was 10 years before we got them off of there. Wow. So that took out a whole generation. I mean, it really destroys the children. And the same thing is happening where? Flint, Chicago, Lesbos, Greece, Peru in a mining company, mining town. So this is still going on. I won the case in 2016. I started in 26, so 10 years to win that case. Finally won the case in 2016, and UNMIK and the United Nations has not paid one dime. Wow. Not one dime. So we're still fighting that, trying to get the actual compensation for the people who were injured, and also an apology that they were told by the court, give them an apology. They won't even do that. They won't do that.
Well.
So, yeah. One of the other things that I did when I was there was the Roma very much look at the African-American black struggle as a model for them. They really view the struggles that have gone on here as what they've gone through. And I saw it. And I'm old enough to have been in Chicago in 1963 doing marches. And so they are living and treated the way that African Americans were treated 100 years ago.
Second class citizens.
Oh, third.
Wow.
Third. Women are second.
Okay.
They're third. And so they had me bring over the Noble.
That's interesting.
Oh, it's very interesting. They had me bring over Noble because they wanted to bring the black police officers over to talk to them about how they could respond appropriately to the hostility, the violence from the police in Europe against them. So they are the most discriminated against group in Europe. Absolutely.
Man, we should have had that on the show a long time ago.
Well, we're doing a panel at the end of May on this, and we're going to have the people from Peru, Greece, the U.S. We also have the lawyer who did the suit in Haiti. Remember when the UN came and everybody got cholera from the UN? Soldiers that they brought over from, I forgot where, somewhere. Yeah. And so they didn't even get as far as I did. But they did sue the UN, and again, they didn't get far. So part of the whole thing is holding institutions accountable. Okay. Holding institutions accountable.
And that's something that I've gathered from your action alerts, the emails
Yes.
that I get. So for those who don't know, Dianne Post is very involved with the legal goings on in the city and the state. And she has an email list where she keeps folks like me as informed as we can be.
Right.
And all we need to do is just kind of peruse what's up for vote.
And most important to you, that you want to take time to
Right.
respond on.
Exactly. And so we're going to talk about how people can plug into that a little bit later on in the show,
Okay.
because we want to talk about what's on the floor as well. But this is who's joining us today. So again, as Q mentioned, an esteemed guest, someone that is very much an ally and very much, obviously, someone who's willing to get in the trenches and make some stuff happen. So thank you again for joining us today. It's really an honor to even be able to sit with you. So yeah, there's that. But there was something that happened this week that Q and I decided that we wanted to talk about. So we'll start there. And for those of you who have the TMZ app on your phone, for those of you, you're I hear you, Q. I hear you sighing over there. But you might not really understand, or you might not be able to guess how I'm going to deal with this. But anyway, for those who have the TMZ app, you might have seen. For those that don't, or don't really pay attention to TMZ, there was an officer last week. He was in, I want to say it was South Carolina, pulled over a 20-year-old with no headlights on his car, and he pulled him out of the car at gunpoint, and it's all recorded. There's a video of it, and the officer, of course, was very firm with the young man, and obviously if there's a gun pointed at you, you're going to fear for your life, and that's what the young man ended up saying. His mother, if I remember correctly, she was able to watch the whole thing as it unfolded. And I have been pulled out of a car at gunpoint by the police before. And Q and I, we talk about these sorts of things all the time. And so I wanted to go through this on the show so that we can really look at it. And I'm gonna look at it from the side of the officer, because if I'm honest, that's kind of a step in the right direction, the way the officer handled it. So first off, I want to hear your thoughts on it, Q. So talk to me.
Rams just pointed out that there was an audible sigh. And when we first sat down and had our first conversation about what we thought this platform could and would provide to people, we were very, very aware and very, I don't want to say self-conscious, but we never wanted it to become an echo chamber, and we never wanted to look at each other and say, man, are we talking about this again? Yeah. Just to not exhaust our listeners, you know what I mean? To not wear on them, and to have this content that's so heavy that it's exhausting to say and exhausting to listen to. The audible sigh was more about us having another one of these situations to talk about.
Sure.
This one did not play out the way many have, and I think we're both kind of, that sigh is more relief at that point.
Sure.
And you and I don't know if the term survivor is proper, but
I think so.
But you and I,
gun pointed at you.
but you and I together are survivors of a hostile interaction with law enforcement.
Yeah.
So, these situations, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of going through them, resonate differently when you have.
Yeah.
It's more of a first person account, and you're kind of reading, watching, and hoping, when I get to the end of this, I hope that this young man or this family or this young woman, that they get to go home to their families. And we can be upset about things not going the way that they should have, but relieved that they didn't go the way that they could have.
Exactly.
So I'm going to pass the ball back to Ramses.
Okay.
But when I forwarded the message to you, it was more to see how it would bounce off of you, right? Because we see so many of these cases, we see so many examples of things that go horribly wrong. There was some nuance to this one, and I thought that you would appreciate it, and I thought our audience would as well.
Sure. So let's provide the nuance. In this instance, there had just been a shooting, I believe a house in South Carolina. There was a shooting at a house. And so the police were already looking for someone who might have been moving suspiciously or might have been trying to conceal themselves or whatever. So from the officer's perspective, if you see a car with no headlights, that's probably something worth investigating. That's fair. In my opinion, that's fair. And when you see the interaction, you recognize that the officer is, again, firm, but doesn't really lose, hear me out. Doesn't really lose it, as illustrated by the fact that the kid's still alive. We've been having these conversations, and we have to be fair. We have to understand that, okay, if they say it's a tough job to be a police officer, and I've never been a police officer, that's something that I can allow. We can admit that to the record. That can be a part of this conversation. It's a tough job. It might be scary when you're responding to a shooting at a house, and you see a car with no headlights, because if that's the right person, there might be a gun in that car, and I might need to move with a degree of caution. That's fair. And it far be it for me to make the case for the police, but I will be fair. And I expect the same, right? But when you first get these messages sent, and when I first got the message sent to my phone, it's very alarming. And as Q mentioned, this is something that, and as I mentioned, this is something that I've lived through myself. In brief, and I believe I shared this story once before on the show, but in brief, I was 19 years old. I was still in school. I was on my way to class. And I had my cousin in the car with me, and my cousin had just moved to Arizona from California. He was having an asthma attack. The climate is different here. He could not breathe. I'm only saying this because it's relevant to the story. My cousin is 6'6" and extra dark skin. Think if Shaq and Jay-Z had a baby, that would be my cousin. He's not the sort of person that you are going to, whatever comes to mind, if especially if you're afraid of black skin, this is what happened to my cousin and I. So I went to the bank. I was driving a bright yellow Dodge Neon. Remember, this is around the time of Fast and Furious. So I got one of those $200 Mako paint jobs, put some 18s on my car, and I was the man, 19, right? But a bright yellow Dodge Neon. It's a very visible car. Went to the bank, pulled out money from the ATM. This was days before Cash App and all that sort of stuff. I was going to buy my cousin an inhaler so he could breathe while I went to class. As soon as I left the bank parking lot, police get behind me out of nowhere. And because I'm me and conscious, I don't like the police behind me. I know that can lead to bad things. So I immediately turned down a neighborhood street to let this officer go on his way, because I hadn't been on the road long enough for him to get behind me, because I hadn't done any. There was no moving for me to have a moving violation. Turn down the next street I find, and the officer follows me. But when I'm looking out the rear view, but now I see a second car behind him. So I'm like, uh-oh. They are on to me. And then they turn on the lights, pull me over. And, I know the drill at this point in my life. So, they're on the horn. They're telling me what to do. Throw your keys out the window, stick your hands out the window with your left hand, open the door, push the door away from you, keep your hands up, step out of the car, walk back to the sound of my voice. And I'll never forget it. If you make any sudden movements, we will kill you. Now, we will shoot you, not we will wound you or whatever. And it's the most terrifying thing that you could ever hear. I don't hide my emotions on this show. I don't think that I'm a weak person. And if I feel something, I feel it all the way through and through. That was one moment in my life when I did not cry. I was too afraid to cry. I'm from Compton, California. I never thought I was going to die until that moment. It was the wildest thing. I was like, they're going to kill me. What did I do? What's wrong? And of course, it's for their protection, but it's so weird because they're supposed to protect them. So, I know, right? Isn't that funny? Anyway, let me get the story off because I want to hear both of your reactions if I can. So, I'm walking back, and then they asked me to lift my shirt up. So I remember I'm facing away from the officers. They're all behind me. I reach down, I lift up my shirt. I didn't make any sudden movements. And so you could see my waist, and that I didn't have any weapons on my waist or whatever. I think that's kind of the point of that. And then they asked me to rotate slowly. And when I rotated, remember I said there was 2 police cars. Well, now there's like 8. Mm-hmm. And they all have guns, like shotguns and handguns, and they're behind doors and this whole thing, right? And now it's like, that feeling when the blood goes away from your face and everything is cold and your heart is beating like so hard on your chest, and it feels like your heart is moving you, and everything you think is like, I'm doing the wrong thing, and you panic. And this is why I know what panic looks like, because I was there. And your brain says, run. Your instincts say, hide behind the car. There's they're going to take, this is it. And people say your life flashes before your eyes. That is so absolutely true. And it goes like that, and it's black and white. I remember this feeling. That's all I got to do. That's all the life I got to live. There was more. What happens tomorrow? It's a very, I felt so defeated looking at those weapons pointed at me. I was going to school, man. So, I'm terrified, and somehow I mechanically managed to still cooperate. It was kind of like out of body. It was like I was controlling my own body with a remote control, like a remote control car, and I didn't quite understand the controls. So I'm like watching myself try my best to cooperate with these orders from this officer. Anyway, I get back far enough. I'm looking away. Now my heart's beating. I'm backing toward the officers. They get me and they put me in handcuffs. And I remember they were so mean. They like cut my arms up, and I was bleeding. And I remember when I went to class, my teacher, Dr. Westenberg, she wanted to make a report because my hands were all cut up, and they like grabbed my arms with the handcuffs, right? But remember I told you about my cousin, 6'6", dark skin. They asked him to get out of the car. Now he can't breathe. Still can't breathe. We had just left the bank to get the money. So
he can't breathe before the interaction with the officer.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Already having a medical issue, and we're going to go to like the drugstore or a pharmacy to get an inhaler. So they get him out of the car. Same thing. They're just talking to him, and when he stood up from the car, I was like, oh my God, because he stands so tall, and beautiful man. Beautiful to look at, but intimidating if you're taught that that's what a criminal looks like, or that's what a gangbanger looks like. My cousin's never been in a gang. He plays basketball. He's the funniest person you would ever meet. Means no, he's a huge teddy bear, but if you're looking at him and you're trained to see him as the enemy, and that's exactly, they were treating him, and I'm like, you guys don't get it. He's not. Why are you so mad? And he kind of succumbed to those instincts a little bit more than I did. He wasn't as composed, and he's kind of big and awkward, so when they're telling him to pick up his pants, his shirt is a lot bigger than mine, and he's been down and when he moves, there's grand movements, this large figure moving around. And so I saw it play out, and I saw how much more threatening he could have looked to them, but he couldn't breathe. He's trying to cooperate, and he's awkward already. And so they were so mean to him, and I just remember being helpless, like, oh my God, they're going to kill my cousin, I love him. He's older than me, and he's always loved me, and I'm just watching it happen. And again, that feeling of being defeated, like you just have to watch the rest of this play out. So, not to be too dramatic, they bring him back to the car, a different car, and then they go through my car, and then they take out my backpack and they throw my homework on the ground, and then they went through my back seat. And remember, this is all Fast and Furious time, so I have like speakers in my car, and I have like I don't know, whatever else was in there, and it wasn't the cleanest car, but it was my car. And I just remember they took my homework and they emptied out my backpack on the street, and it wasn't even the sidewalk, it was in the street, and they were just looking for whatever. And I had $20, and they asked me where did I get the $20 from, and I said that's why I went to the bank. And I was like, I was going to buy an inhaler for my cousin because he just came here from California. He doesn't have any money yet, he doesn't have a job, and he can't breathe. He couldn't breathe all night. That's why we're up so early. And finally they said that, okay, well, you fit the description of suspicious characters or suspicious persons or something, and you can go. And I remember asking, well, can somebody give me a note, or somebody can have your name or something, because my teacher's going to be mad because I'm going to be late for school, and I still have to go help my cousin, and I remember they gave me the name and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, went to school, lived through it. It was fine. But I want to maintain, I lived in Compton, California in the 80s, never had a gun pulled on me. The only time in my life I ever had a gun pulled on me was by the police. Isn't that weird? They're supposed to help. But this is not a beat up on the police story as much as it is to illustrate how interactions often tend to go in at least my personal experience. And then, of course, that fits the larger narrative and how we understand the way that police tend to interact with black, particularly young black folks. But the reason why there's some parallels to this story here, the one we saw on TMZ, is because they're very similar circumstances. The officers are doing their job. In the instance with me, they were looking for someone who had just robbed the bank, which I thought was very unfair. Remember, I was driving a bright yellow Dodge Neon, which I don't think is the type of getaway car that you want when robbing a bank in the daytime, And then very early on in the interaction, you can tell that we are not the folks that you're looking for. But once I think a lot of times once police commit to a direction that they want to go in, they're going to see it through to the end. And we talked about that last week with the man on the side of the road in the U-Haul, where they're like, we want to search this U-Haul. And he's like, man, it's a big truck. I did a small lane change where I thought this was the right exit or whatever. There's no need to search my truck. And then now I have to stay here. Now I'm getting arrested. Now I have to call my parents. And you bring the dogs out. The dogs indicate that there's drugs in the truck where there's no drugs. So now that gives you license to search it. 3 hours later, you've committed to this course of action. Meanwhile, all the crime in the world's happening, out there in the real world, but you're here picking on me. And it feels very like it doesn't, I don't believe that the police would have treated me or my cousin that way if we were 65-year-old privileged corporate executives who were white. And I think that a lot of it has to do with profiling, and because that profiling often brings out the worst type of interactions, and oftentimes, as we've seen, results in harm, death, false imprisonment, you name it, of black and brown bodies. It is important for us to continue to speak about these things. The reason why this TMZ story was something that I wanted to highlight, and Q wanted to highlight this week, is because for this interaction specifically, I believe the officer played it fair. I'm just going to say it. If that's the job you have to do, hey, I need you to sit down. This is what's going on. Everyone's on the same page. And, I implore you to look it up. We'll put a link up on the Instagram and the Facebook for you to check it out yourself. But kudos to that officer. It's a tough job, sure. And you did it the way you had to do it, sure. And everybody walked away, great. No one's bleeding and didn't really feel as unfair as at least my interaction felt. And so wanted to make sure I said that. Anyway, if you're just tuning in to Civic Cipher, I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
They call me Q Ward.
Yes, indeed. And our guest today is the one of four, Dianne Post. Earlier on, we got to talk about the action alerts that you sent out. So I want you to explain what these action alerts are, and then let's talk about everything that you are doing right now. But first, I want to talk about these action alerts, because this is really what got me to reach out to you.
Okay, I started maybe 5 or 6 years ago doing this for the National Organization for Women. And what I do, I'm a lawyer, and so I actually worked at the legislature at one point in time, a long time ago. Okay. So what I do is when the legislature starts, which is in mid-January of every year, I read, or at least look at, every single bill that is introduced. And this year was a huge amount, was 1,800 of them, if you can believe that. Wow. Yeah, 1,800 of them. And because sometimes what's in a bill, non-lawyers wouldn't notice the way that bill might be able to be used against you or in a negative way. And so even some lawyers wouldn't notice that. So I read them all, I look at them all, and I see, this could be a problem. So I make a chart of them. And then I follow them. I'm on the website for the state legislature, which sends you, it's so much nicer now that it's automated. You can put the bills you're following, the numbers of the bills, and then every week you'll get an automatic alert from the state legislature that this bill is up for some kind of a hearing. Okay. In the committee, in the caucus, in on the floor, wherever. But at least then you know which bills are actually going and which are not. So then when I know a bill is actually going to be heard somewhere, then I will put it in my alert and say, what happened last week? This is what happened last week. Bill X, Y, and Z was up, and this is what happened. It passed, it didn't pass, it moved on, it was voted on, all Republicans voted this way, all Democrats voted that way, or it was split, or whatever the case may be. Then I have a section that said, what's happening next week? So this is where you need to take action. So these bills that I've now enumerated, and I have my categories. I do criminal justice bills for the NAACP and other groups. I do women's rights bills for now. I do voting rights bills because everybody ought to be concerned about that, right? And public school funding. I don't follow it that closely because a lot of other groups are following public school funding, very closely. And I follow the police and BLM this year because this is really a focus this year, which didn't exist before, which is attacking BLM and supporting the police. So those are all on my list of bills I'm following. So then I find out what's happening next week, and I try to get my alert out Saturday morning because the meetings start on Monday. So you have to contact them sometimes 24 hours in advance, so you have to do it Saturday or Sunday. Now, the meeting might be Wednesday, and you could do it Tuesday, obviously, but I try to get it out Saturday, maybe Sunday if it's really horrible, so that you have time to do it. And then you go through the bills. You can do every single one of them. So I put the bill with a short, what it means, a short summary of what it means, what it does, and why we should oppose it or support it. Or that there's mixed parts of it. Sometimes there's mixed. Some people think we should support it for that reason. Other people think we should oppose it for that reason. Read it yourself and figure out what you think.
Sure, I've noticed that.
Yeah. Or I'll say, no, that we should oppose this because of that, or we should support this because of that. And then I'll put in the third column the committee that it's going to be in. And if you're on RTS, which is the request to speak, which is the best thing to be on, you can just click the committee and then you send the email to everybody. If you're not on RTS, I also put in the names of the people who are on that committee. And then everybody's email down at the legislature is first initial, last name, at AZLEG, so AZ Legislature, LEG.org. So everybody's is the same. So it's just, so I put the name in there. And then you can just send them emails if you're not on the RTS system. So then, that's for people to take action. And people don't have time to read all those bills. Yeah. I barely have time to read all those bills. Sometimes it's taken me 22 hours in a week to prepare this thing. That was the worst one. It was 22 hours in 1 week. I kept track. And so people don't have time to read all of that. And they don't often understand what it means. And, well, what has this got to do with me? Well, let me tell you what it's got to do with you. And then, I didn't notice that, And then what to do about it.
Right.
Who to contact and what to say. I don't tell them what to say, but I have enough in the summary that you can come up with something, right? And so then I send that out every week. And that goes on until the legislature is over with. And at this point in time, the committees are over. The only committees that are meeting are appropriations, which is money, and rules, which is just a standing committee that's required to say it's constitutional, and they don't take testimony. They don't listen to their own rules attorneys. There's really no point in contacting them. But those are the only two committees. It's required that they go through the rules committee before they can land on the floor. Okay. So now most of the bills are, contact the appropriations committee, and there'll be more of that as the budget gets rolling, which is got to start pretty soon. And then contact your own senator or your own two representatives, because it's going to be on the floor. So that's what, the message is now. And then you choose what you want to do, and you do as much as you can. Maybe there's 15 bills. Maybe you can't do 15. You can do 2.
Right.
Do whatever is most appropriate to you and what's most tugs at your heartstrings.
Sure. And I think that's something that, especially this new group who has been motivated to take action within the last year of our lives, they're looking for a way to parlay, their energy and their motivation to see some action into something meaningful beyond just a display and a protest and marching on the streets. And so I thought that it was really meaningful to make this connection because I didn't realize how important it is to contact your senator. I didn't realize how important it is to let the truth is, for me at least, until recently, I never really thought that. I mean, I knew it because I've taken civics classes and so forth. These people work for me. I knew that.
That's right.
But I didn't really know it. And so when you call, you can have a little bit of bass in your voice. You work for me. This is the community I want to see, and I want you to understand that this is who I am, this is why, and this is how you'll continue to earn my vote. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who don't know that. But the things that will typically connect you to these elected representatives are the way they vote, the things that they vote on, the things that come to committee and to the floor, and so forth. And so, again, I thought it was very meaningful to have someone like you help bridge that gap.
Well, I want to say something about the people thinking that what they do doesn't matter.
Sure.
It really, really matters. Let me give you an example. It used to be, it still is, but the most impactful thing you can do is go and meet with them. Mm-hmm. But of course, all during COVID, last year they shut down early and we couldn't meet, and this year we're not able to meet. So that's been off the table for a couple of years. But when we're back and able to do that, the most impactful thing is to go to meet with them. Why? Because they have to look you in the face, and because you've taken the time. It's pretty easy to send an email. It's pretty easy to click on the right to speak. It takes a little more time to get your body down there and actually meet with them. So when they don't want to meet with you, they'll never give you a meeting. And that's happened with a lot of legislators. They just don't. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have time. I'm all booked. They're busy meeting with lobbyists who give them money for their campaigns. That's who they're meeting with. So the second most impactful thing you can do is telephone them. Again, it takes more time to actually telephone them than it does to just click on an email or click on a right to speak. Right? Those things are valuable. The phone call is the next most valuable since we can't meet with them. Sure. They actually keep hash marks. They're required to keep hash marks of how many calls they get on this bill, how many calls they get on that bill. And if they get 10 or more, this is down here in Arizona, 1700 West Wash. If they get 10 or more calls on a bill, they go, oh my God, people are really concerned about this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 10 or more.
That's not a lot at all.
That's not a lot at all. Okay. It's absolutely doable. And that will get them, I better pay attention to this. Oftentimes they will go in, they don't even know what they're voting on. The caucus decides, okay, we're supporting these, okay, we're not supporting these. That's the leadership of the party that's telling them what to support and what not to support. But when they get 10 calls from their own constituents, they go, oh, holy mackerel, I better pay attention. What is this about? I mean, I was at a hearing the other night when the guy that introduced the bill, he had no idea what the bill was about. It was quite complicated, and it's one of the most horrible bills there are, and it's very long and complicated. He wasn't an attorney, and he just came in and he just said, oh, here's a bill, and this is what it does. And then when the questions started and the lawyers started in, and he could not answer any questions at all because he didn't know anything. He was told, undoubtedly by Alec, introduce this, and boom, he did. So he called on an attorney from the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is one of those names that means the opposite of what it says. They're not defending freedom at all. So he called on that attorney who happened to be there physically and spoke up. But then we had our attorneys who were all online. And when we started hammer, 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 bang, 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 what does this mean? What does that mean? Doesn't that do that? Doesn't that say? Doesn't that? He was hubba, 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 hubba. And it became perfectly clear that this was somebody else's agenda. And you were just following along. There was a couple of attorneys on the committee as well. And we had fed them information ahead of time, so they could speak very intelligently about it and say, well, this is absolutely incredible. Even a non-lawyer could read this thing and see that this absolutely means X, Y, Z. So it is so important, and 10 calls will get attention.
I'm so glad you said that because, I think that, at least for me, when you launch a phone-in campaign, you make a phone call and then you think like, okay, well, I've done my part. I hope that 1,000 of us make, but to know that you're one of 10 that would, change it makes you feel like, okay, I'm making an impact with my phone call.
The other thing I hear from people that get my action alert or say, well, I don't know what to say. What would I say? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything. Well, number one, you have it written, but they don't want you to be a lawyer. They don't care. That's not why you should be calling. You call and you say, my name is XYZ. I'm a constituent. I'm concerned about this bill because my child's school doesn't have, I don't have good internet at home, and now my child has to study at home, and I can't, the child can't often go to the Zoom meetings because the internet is down, and we need to have internet be regulated as a utility. Now, you don't have to say that because you may not go that far, but my child needs good, consistent, fast broadband.
Now, I want to say this, now that you mentioned that. This is, I'm so glad you're here because this whole process is something that, again, is so foreign to most folks who wake up, they go to work.
Yes.
They pay their bills, they raise their kids for 15 minutes a day.
Correct.
And then they try to get a little sleep. But a phone call, or as you mentioned, if you can get some FaceTime with someone, it goes such a long way. And
yes.
I'm learning this right now. So if you're listening to our voices, and you're learning something new, understand that we got the right one in the studio today.
There are many places that will, and if you're afraid to speak, the speaking in public is often the most scary thing for, like, the majority of people are terrified to speak in public. So, but you're not speaking in public. You're just speaking on the phone, and maybe you won't even get the particular legislator. You'll get their aide, and that's even better because their aides are probably a lot nicer than they are. Be nice to the aides. Always be nice to the secretaries and the aides. Who can get you in that door?
Those two.
The secretary and the aides. That is something, women learn that early on, and y'all should learn it because that who gets you in the door.
Okay.
And if they like you, they'll put your appointment ahead of some other people that were nasty to them or treated them like, well, you're just a secretary. You don't know anything, And I was secretary when I was going to law school and when I was going to college, and that's exactly what I did. You want to treat me trash? Oh, guess what, honey? Where's your memo? Oh, bam. In the trash goes your memo. So don't do that. Don't do that. Them are the important people. Yeah. Those other people down there, they don't know what they're doing, most of them.
All right, so I want to ask you this. What are some of the issues that are being voted on or discussed or whatever that stand out in your mind as things that people should really get behind immediately?
Well, voting rights.
Okay.
We know that nationwide that there are attacks on voting rights. I mean, Georgia's obviously an example, but there are here too. And I have 15 voting rights bills on my list, but just this morning I read somebody that said there's 22 still moving. So I've obviously missed a few. So I get 3 other alerts like this so that, we're all sharing with each other. Okay. So voting rights is a huge issue. And we seem to be unable to stop Karen Fann at the Senate, but we can stop Ducey. And how do you stop Ducey? The business community.
Real quick, Ducey is the
governor of
Arizona.
And the business community came out today and said, don't do these voter suppression bills. Don't sign them. Because why? Who got boycotted? Georgia. And that Major League Baseball league or team or whatever it was, that didn't happen. What's coming up in Phoenix in 2023? The Super Bowl.
Oh, wow.
In Glendale in 2023. Who boycotted Phoenix and got us MLK Day?
The NFL.
That was black folks, and that was the NFL.
Yes.
So I've written to him already, and you can go on his webpage, write him a handwritten letter, go on his webpage, do whatever. But remind him, businesses are not going to stand for this.
Sure.
They're not going to stand for it. Remember MLK Day. Remember the NFL, who are set to be here on 2023. Don't do this, because we will mount a boycott.
And there's something that's, I think it's incredible about this sort of thing, because, there's an intersection where corporate interests have to consider cultural interests. It sometimes it comes late in our opinion as being people of color.
It's like 400 years too late, but
just a few years too late.
Centuries,
but eventually it comes, and you have to come to terms with, okay, do we want to be on the right side of this or the wrong side of this? And even if you morally don't care, monetarily it'll make sense. And so that's
now that there was a huge number of black CEOs that put out a statement saying, don't do this. So now there's a big push. White CEOs, where y'all at? Come on.
That's what I'm talking about.
Come on. Get up here.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's now the push. And like you're saying, this is, we hope it's happening, but we hoped it was happening in 1968 too.
Sure. That's fair.
I'm old enough to remember those days and have gone through those days and thought we'd achieve something, and here we are.
Well, I implore you, if you're listening to the show, to speaking of which, let's talk about it. How would someone receive these action alerts?
Oh, I just need to get their email. I'll put them on the MailChimp. And can they email you? Can they send it to your show, and then you give it to me?
Yeah.
Boom. Send your email to...
Send us a direct message. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram. Just look for Civic Cipher, or you can go to civiccipher.com, and then we'll connect.
You shoot it to me, and they're on the list.
I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Now, we did talk about voter suppression. We've been talking about that quite a bit. And then next week's show, we're going to be talking about the Stop Asian Hate. We're going to have some folks from the AAPI community up to talk about that. But is there anything beyond voter suppression? Anything else that you think that we should know about that's happening behind the scenes, if you will?
Oh, yes.
That we're not aware of?
One thing is happening 2 days from now.
What's that?
And I hope that the people in Phoenix will get on top of this. And that is, you know how we've been trying to get that police advisory board in Phoenix since I moved here in 1980, and we were trying to get it then. That is 41 years ago, and we don't have it yet. So that's one thing. But the city has now come to a, quote, agreement, unquote, with plea. Plea is the police. I can't remember what it stands for, but anyway, it's the union. It's the police union. So they've come to a, quote, agreement with them. And so if they approve this agreement, then they're going to give the police a raise. Okay.
A raise?
A raise. So this meeting... You got it. You heard me. I know. Shake your head.
All right.
So this meeting is happening. Well, the meetings are there are these budget hearings going on all around the city. So whatever district you're in, you need to pay attention to this. So I'm in 8, which is Carlos Garcia, and he's having a variety of different meetings, 4 different meetings, 1 in Spanish, 3 in English, blah, blah, blah. So the one I'm going to is the 8th, and I'm going to speak against it because of several things. Plea is not giving you anything. Plea is giving nothing in this, quote, agreement. I read it today. I just saw it today. I read it today. And what they're saying is, number one, if you file a police complaint through the City of Phoenix Police Department complaint system, if anybody ever has, at the bottom it says, filing a false report against a police officer is a crime, and you will be charged. Well, this is done deliberately to scare people, right? So they've agreed to remove that from their website. Well, guess what? There's a bill in the state legislature to make it mandatory to be a misdemeanor 1 to file a false report, and it will be required on all police departments around the entire state to put on their complaint form. So plea gets what they gave up through the legislative process. This is Kavanaugh, who is an ex-transit officer from New Jersey, who is the police, water carrier, the gopher boy. That has passed the House. It's passed the Senate Judiciary and the Senate rules. It's only got one step left, or two steps. One step is being passed on the Senate floor and then going to Ducey. So plea will get what they want, even though they, quote, agree to give it up. The second thing they're agreeing to give up is right now they have a provision in their union agreement that the officer gets told about any complaint and has to meet or can meet with the union before he has to go to meet with the investigator, so they can get their story straight, right? And so they would remove that,
Wow.
that they would have to meet with the union before, and also that they would create this database of disciplinary officers, and they could use these disciplines in, hiring, promotion, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Well, guess what? There's a bill by Kavanaugh at the state legislature. No, it's not by Kavanaugh. It's Pingerelli and Payne at the state legislature that does two things. It requires officers to get a 10-day notice of any time you're going to put anything negative about them in this database. So in 10 days, it doesn't mandate they go to the union, but would you go to the union to get your story straight? You would. And then the other part of that says that they would be able to use this database on the negative things, and they would allow that. Well, the piece of legislation that is up, says this database cannot be used in any actions against the officer. I mean, it's useless database. Why would you have a database? What's the point of having a database of officers who've received discipline that you can't use for anything? You can't even fire them. You can't even demote them. You can't even suspend them. What would be the point of even having it? That thing has passed.
Bless your heart.
Passed the House and is also in the Senate. It's passed Senate Judiciary, Senate rules, has two steps, Senate floor, and Ducey. So again, plea pretends to be giving up something in this quote agreement, but they're not giving up anything. And the third thing is, that pleas insisted that the person who sat on this public advisory committee had to be a police officer. And we said, no, it's public advisory committee, and you can't police yourself. Nobody can police themselves. Lawyers can't police themselves. Doctors can't. Nobody can police themselves because of inherent conflict of interest, right? So they'll give that up. Well, guess what? Kavanaugh has a bill in the legislature right now, and it lays out the requirements, the experience and the training that one would have to sit on a citizens advisory board.
It matches.
The only people who would qualify would be cops.
So
it's passed the House, it's passed the Senate Judiciary, it's passed the rules. All it has to do is pass the floor and go to Ducey. So the plea is giving nothing, and in return they want to raise. So of course I gave my testimony. I sent it in because last time when I tried to get on, I couldn't get on the live testimony, and I think they know me, so they probably just did that. So that is Thursday if you're in District 8. But the other thing is on the raise. There's two suggestions you can do. Number one, the police department, when they lose lawsuits against them, the cost of the lawsuit should come out of the police budget.
That's fair.
Right? Why should we cough up more money?
So currently it comes from the city.
It comes from the city, not from the police budget also comes from the city, but it doesn't come out of their direct cash that they got for themselves.
Understood.
The second thing that's been going around for 10 years now is officers should have to buy malpractice insurance.
That's fair, more than fair.
Lawyers have to, doctors have to. When you behave unreasonably, you should pay for your mistakes, not me. Why should I pay for your mistake, right?
Let me ask you something. You know what? I'm gonna come back and ask the question because I want to get your thoughts on where what the thinking behind this defend the police initiative in response to defund the police initiative. So.
I can tell you.
Of course you can. If you're just tuning in to Civic Cipher, I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
They call me Q Ward.
And our guest today is Dianne Post. And yeah, I want to get your thoughts. So, defend the police. It seems like they are able to get away with murder, literally, and they don't want to be held responsible in the same way that a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. And there's this push to, like, have people been brainwashed into think, or is it just that the police serve this community and don't serve that community, and because they serve this community's interests, there's this push to, well, no, let's keep it the way it is. What do you think?
You know how police started, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In the South, it's slave patrols to bring back what?
Runaway slaves.
People's property. And somebody was, yelling at me about this, and so what was the Pinkertons in the North, private security guards to do what? Protect people's property and beat up the miners and the people who were striking and all. It's all about protecting property.
Okay.
Now, so that's how they evolved, and so who's surprised that the Klan is in the police department? I mean, who's surprised about that?
A lot of people pretend to be.
People pretend to be. You can't really be that stupid, can you? But actually, I think it's possible that you can be that stupid. But so that's a big thing. So then there's fear. There's fear. White people have fear, and it's not justified, and it's been centuries of training white brains to be afraid of dark skin.
Hey, listen, white folks, we are not your enemy. We love you.
Duh.
Just want to say that.
So they're afraid. And they're most afraid, too, of losing their position.
I want to say this real quick because most folks listen to us on the radio. You are white.
I am?
That's what you told me. So.
That's the rumor.
That's the rumor.
But, folks listening to your voice may not know that. So I think it's important to say this because,
yes.
If we were to say something like this, it might sound, coming from your lips, it sounds
I can say what you can't say, and you can say things I can't say.
Exactly.
Right,
and so
exactly.
I think it's important that folks know.
Exactly.
But please continue.
One of the, I've been reading about this, and I just watched a really good seminar today on how your brain learns these bad things. How come we're stuck on these stupid ideas and bad ideas and we can't get it off? Mm-hmm. And the guy's describing it, and both the book and the guy today that I listened to, we learn these things at a foundational level. We learn them young. And we're told certain things when we're young. And that becomes the foundation. And we learn more as we get older, and we pile on top of that, and we pile on top of that, and we hope you go to college and you pile on top of that, and you pile on top of that. So you learn and you change your mind because you learn new things and stuff like that. But he said, when it's a foundational belief, it's hard to throw it out because, for example, if I told you, well, the English alphabet doesn't really have 26 letters, and A and C really don't look like that. She's out of her mind and she doesn't know what she's talking about, right? That can't be. And another example is my own mother. I think she was 52 or 54 or something. And I'd gotten her out to go with me to, politic for some woman and all kinds of things. And we went to get a beer because that's what you do in Wisconsin when you're politicking. You're going to get a beer. So I said, Ma, just admit you're a feminist. She got so mad at me. She just came unglued and yelled at me and said, I'm not a feminist, I'm not a feminist, I'm not a feminist. I said, Ma, you believe everything that feminists believe. You believe in equality between women and men. Of course. You believe in equal pay. Of course. You believe women should have a choice. Of course. So, okay, what about you as a feminist? And she said, and this taught me something that I'll never forget. She said, if I admit that I'm a feminist, my entire life has been a lie. I've lived my entire life as a lie. And I'm not strong enough to throw that away. She got, she didn't want to get married, but she got pregnant. So she got married, she had her baby, she stayed home, she wanted to work, she wanted to go to college. She wanted to go to school so bad that at 8th grade, her dad wouldn't let her go to school. So she waited 2 years till they moved to town, and then she went to school 2 years older than everybody else because she wanted to go to school so bad. And she finished high school, but she wanted to go to college and she wasn't ever able to go. When I tried to get her to go in the 50s and 40s, she wasn't going to do it. But I understood from her then this so attacks. She said, my whole life's a lie. I mean, what if I were to say, I don't know what I could think of to say, I haven't lived my life like that, but so for a white person in the South who believes that blacks are inferior, all right, to say, you've been wrong your whole life. You know you're wrong your whole life? You know that's absolutely not true? Biologically, there is no race. There is only one race in the entire universe. There is only one. And this is not, none of this is true. They would have to admit that they'd lived their life as a lie the entire time. And that's a fundamental, foundational belief of them, and they can't pull it out. They can't pull it out and throw it away. So this is how he was explaining how we get these crazy ideas about things and just can't let them go.
Well, it's unfortunate because we are there's been some masterful execution over the years with respect to pitting us against each other.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that we are on this side of it and have to appeal to good, kind people who can see beyond their own, four walls, their own front porch, and, say, that's not right. Folks like yourself and a lot of folks that have come up on the show and a lot of folks who listen to the show every week who might not have as much melanin, but they are just as much human, just as much our sisters and our brothers, and recognize that in a lot of instances that melanin counts against us, their brothers and sisters. And so when it comes to this defund thing with the police, I think anyone listening to that would recognize that the police don't need defending. They are literally a runaway train.
They're a runaway train.
Exactly. But there's still going to be these people who push back against, it might not be a perfect plan, but it's certainly something that is like causing folks to reconsider what it takes to keep communities safe. All right, go ahead. And we got about a minute or so left.
I've even heard from white people, well, that they shouldn't be using the word defund because, that just confuses people. And I say, you have no business telling them how to run their own civil rights strike. So shut up.
Talk to them. Go ahead, man.
Oh, shut up,
One time. That's why Civic Cipher is on the radio. Let them know. Hey, listen, I love that. I love that so much. And you know what? That's just as good a place to wrap this up. So one more time.
Even though we could talk to her for.
Oh, listen.
I could go on for hours.
We got to turn the mics off, but please, we're going to talk a little more. But yes, please consider plugging in with Dianne Post. Of course, you can reach her through our website.
And 2 N's in Dianne if you look me up on the internet.
Again, that's Dianne Post. Get behind her, get behind what she's doing, be active in your communities. A lot of this stuff affects all of Arizona. You can be in Tucson, you can be in Phoenix, you can be in Flagstaff, wherever you are, wherever you live. These things affect you as well. And of course, you can reach her through our website. That's civiccipher.com. We're gonna have some stuff up for her on our social media as well. That's all at Civic Cipher. And I think that's going to do it for us today. Once again, I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
They call me Q Ward.
And special guest, Dianne Post. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
And don't forget to hit the website. Send us your topics. Download this and previous episodes. And as always, your donations are appreciated. The show grows with your support. And you can donate through civiccipher.com. And until next week, y'all. Peace.
Peace.